What's up, Tony? My road was dug out by you. Me? Our road was dug out by someone. Who the hell did that? Really? I haven't spent the entire day there. Yes, exactly. Is my being your neighbor truly that much of a problem for you? Tony Beets and Parker Schnabel have been the Yukon's bitterest enemies for years. They are the undeniable heavyweights of the Klondike, you see. They have made fun of one another season after season, from screaming confrontations to multi-million-dollar property purchases. Tony, just show up and shut us down in the spring. We have barely begun slewing. Really? Insert the item. Stop splewing. Waves caused by hydraulics. It's going to be just that. Okay, but who is really in control? We're going to put them in the final showdown today. In point-for-point struggle for Yukon supremacy, we're counting every slur, every power move, and every dubious tactic. The official rivalry scoreboard is being activated. Parker receives a point each time he strikes Tony. Tony always scores when he beats Parker. This is Beets versus Parker. The first round involves the tenant and the landlord. In Season 4, the conflict between Parker and Tony started when a teenage Parker set foot on Tony's property. It was a straightforward dynamic. Parker was the young man attempting to establish himself, and Tony was the king. Never in my life have I seen that much gold in the pan. You need to go out more, man. He showed great deal of interest in helping me and seemed to get along with me really quickly. The problem is that Tony never failed to remind him of that. Tony made fun of Parker's audacious plan to mine 1,000 ounces early on, telling him outright that it was a dumb concept and that he would fail. Put the newcomer in his place with a classic power move. That's a barb from the beginning. Tony gets point. However, Parker resisted being intimidated. He gained confidence as he began to extract significant amounts of gold from Scribner Creek. Parker publicly questioned Tony's land management during a heated dispute, saying that Tony wasn't keeping his half of the bargain and that the ground was in disarray. He essentially labeled his renowned landlord a jerk for opposing the Vikings at such an early age. Parker joins the board. The digs continued. Tony couldn't help but take credit after witnessing Parker's achievement. In a confessional, he utterly disregarded Parker's talent and asserted that the only reason Parker's haul was feasible was because of the golden ground he had so kindly leased him. All I want is a decent place to stay for the long run. I'm not sure if I can stop you, but if I want to, I can definitely make things harder. Why would you find it easier? That verbal insult is textbook. Tony gets a point. It wasn't only words that caused tension. Resources were at issue. Tony had the ultimate trump card for years. Parker needed a water license to operate his factory, which he controlled. Parker's multi-million-dollar operation was left high and dry, as he would frequently take his time going over the paperwork. Parker was spotted in a rage, accusing them of purposefully trying to undermine him. Parker receives a point for pointing out the power trip. When asked about the water, Tony's answer was a shrug of frigid indifference. By portraying the dilemma as Parker's issue rather than his own, he effectively urged Parker to handle it. It made Parker appear like a novice who couldn't take the strain, and it was a lesson in dismissing. The Viking has another point there. The financial strain increased with Parker's size, straining their relationship to the limit. The royalty war is the second round. The financial agreement between Parker and Tony had escalated into a full-fledged conflict by Season 9. The problem is that, regardless of how much gold Parker discovered, Tony's royalty rates were set to make him wealthy. The percentage Parker owed Tony became crippling as his operation expanded. Simply put, he explained that he was paying an astounding 25% royalty after 6,000 ounces. That amounted to about $2 million in an 8,000-ounce season. You're implying that I can consume 6,000 ounces without reaching 25%. Do you wish to go for 6,000? Do it. It's okay. Everything was in the 20%. Brighten my day. Hurry, hurry. What happens if we surpass 6,000? A deal is a deal. 25%. To be honest, I'd go broke doing that, Parker said plainly, characterizing Tony's refusal to renegotiate as pure selfishness. It's a straight shot. Renegotiate as pure selfishness. It's a straight shot. Point to Parker. However, Tony Beets' sentimentality did not get him the throne. He used traditional psychological warfare in response. He made fun of Parker in his interviews, writing off his worries as the whims of a naive child who didn't understand how the real world functions. He used a tried-and-true tactic to minimize his opponent by framing Parker's despair as inexperience. The Viking counter-punched sharply. Give Tony a point. Parker chose to retaliate with a cunning chess maneuver rather than words. He discovered a cunning weakness in his contract. He established a second wash facility, passing just enough material through each to maintain his lower royalty bracket, rather than putting all of his dirt through one. Tony Beets received a huge middle finger from his foreman. Parker gets a lot of credit for that cunning act of defiance. There are repercussions when you give the Viking the finger. We are simply being killed by these rising royalties. I simply cannot do it. For me, it makes no difference. I mean, a deal is a deal. When Tony learned of it, he quickly retaliated by storming onto Parker's worksite in a fit of rage. He said, "Sneaking through the yard with rock trucks, and now you're slewing over here." Then he took the unimaginable step of ordering his team to stop Parker's entire business. It was a bare show of might. Tony gets a point. Parker was backed into a corner and retaliated in full fury. "You get over $1 million this year," he said, calling Tony avaricious in front of him. "You just need to relax and earn money." Tony retorted icily, "That's not good enough." Parker lost it all and retaliated with a string of profanities. Parker gets a point for that act of outright defiance. Although the financial struggles were fierce, they were about to become much more private and public. The public meltdown, round 3. Simply Parker vs. Beets, a special television episode, was the culmination of the long simmering animosity. This was no ordinary quarrel. It was an in-person encounter. Parker jumped right in, accusing Tony of stifling him for years. Parker receives a point for delivering the first direct insult during the altercation. Tony, who was skilled in verbal combat, immediately responded. A gold mining prodigy who still has a lot to learn, he mockingly referred to Parker. It was a sarcastic remark meant to hurt and minimize Parker's experience. That is a quintessential insult from Tony. The Viking gets a point. Parker refused to give up. He intensified the situation, stating unequivocally that he was willing to leave the Klondike completely, rather than continue to be controlled by Tony. Tony's revenue and authority over the area were directly threatened. Parker has a power play there. And Stewart is the one with the lowest royalties, so I'm stripping there. Big Red is out of ground, and our other plant is stealing its royalties, you know. We're closing because I refuse to pay a 25% bull. Tony's reply was considerably worse, reminding Parker that he had all the cards, all the land, and all the authority. He threatened Parker's entire future in the Yukon. In essence, he told Parker that he was nothing without him. The Viking receives a point for such menacing threat. The verbal battle persisted in every interview and confessional even after the public confrontation. Throughout his career, Parker portrayed Tony as the primary opponent, saying those fights were with Tony for a lot of the years. It was a calculated method of framing the story. For Parker, that's another point. Tony, however, had mastered the art of the contemptuous remark. He has referred to Parker as spoiled and naive for years. The fact that he continuously claimed responsibility for Parker's success and said it was all because of his ground is frequently forgotten. Tony gets a good point for this, tying the score once more. The rivalry had come to a standstill, but it was on the verge of going too far that no one had anticipated. Family. Family loyalty is crucial in the harsh environment of Klondike mining. It serves as the foundation for empires. Family is not merely essential to the Beets crew, it's the whole company plan. The rivalry between Parker and Tony took a more vicious and personal turn in season 15, which is why the events were so stunning. To put it plainly, nobody anticipated this action. Tony's son, Kevin Beets, did the unimaginable following a string of heated on-camera fights with his own father regarding operational authority and respect. He left Beets' family business, the only job he had ever had, to work for Parker Schnabel, his father's fiercest and most loathed adversary. "You have nothing to pay for right now. You open tab." "Thank you for that." "I do. I am quite thrilled. I am aware of how challenging it can be to get started." "That's fantastic." This was more than just a worker switching jobs. In order to join the opposing army, this prince left his father's country. This was a devastating blow to Tony's emotional health, and Parker gets a lot of credit for exploiting this severe familial division. Tony's response was a masterful demonstration of seething anger and wounded pride. Although he appeared to be trying to act calm and dismiss it as insignificant, you could see the storm building in the back of his eyes. In all honesty, he was enraged during his candid interviews. He struck out with unadulterated scorn, not with sorrow. He disparaged his own son's abilities, suggesting that Parker had only hired Kevin out of resentment, and that he was not a competent operator for his team anyhow. Reframing a terrible betrayal as him only eliminating dead weight was a classic Tony Beats move. Tony receives a point for such defensive and resentful reaction. Parker, naturally, seized the occasion and made the most of it. In a gesture that was far more calculated than it seemed, he greeted Kevin with wide arms. You see, he gained more than just a knowledgeable and proficient machine operator. He also acquired a priceless source of information on the inner workings of the Beats empire, which many others failed to notice. He dealt Tony a severe psychological blow, transforming the family drama of his enemy into a potent tactical advantage. In a single, stunning swoop, Tony's team and his soul were both damaged by this brutal and well-thought-out move. Parker deserves a point. When his other son, Mike, temporarily voiced his own frustrations, Tony was determined not to just ignore his son's public departure. It was a weapon Tony wielded against Parker. In his interviews, he skillfully distorted the facts by openly attributing all of the turmoil in his family to Parker's influence. He portrayed his competition as a poisonous influence, a homewrecker wearing a flannel shirt who was intentionally poisoning his children against him, rather than as a rival. It was a low strike intended to harm Parker's standing and elicit pity for him, but it was a successful one in a war like this. Tony gets a point. The Yukon's power structure was about to be totally upended, with the score all tied up, and the most ancient family lines suddenly crossed. In round 5, the roles are reversed. There has been a significant change in power in the most recent seasons. Parker isn't a tenant anymore. He is now a real competitor and has his own territory. Season 15 was a prime example of this new dynamic. Tony's operation was having trouble, and in order to save his season, he absolutely needed to go to terrain that Parker controlled. Reminiscent of years spent under Tony's control, Parker took a risk. He cut off a possible lifeline by refusing to assist. When dealing with them, you never really know what to anticipate, because the rhythms are so erratic. For example, somebody may be your greatest friend one day, and then yell at you all day the next. Parker receives a clear point for deceiving his former landlady. Tony's answer was blatantly defiant. He didn't plead when confronted with a barrier. He retaliated by pressing his family to find another way to go. His response demonstrated how unyielding he was. He gains a point because of that unwavering will. Their conflict can be reduced to a philosophical conflict when all other factors are taken out. Tony has consistently criticized Parker's strategies, accusing him of having a reckless ambition and an overly corporate managerial style. He stands for the family dynasty, the old guard. Tony receives a final point for continuously criticizing Parker's whole mining strategy. Conversely, Parker stands for the new breed. When he eventually made the transfer to his own claim, it was his greatest triumph, not under Tony's authority. He demonstrated the effectiveness of his contemporary data-driven techniques with his enormous gold totals. He has outperformed Tony in his own right, and it is the last important consideration. When everything is said and done, we have a flawless tie. Who, then, emerged victorious from the Yukon rivalry? Which is it, the genius with the gold, or the Viking with the power? Tell us in the comments section. Remember to like and subscribe as well.